today's conversation, I'm speaking with Tricia Russo. She's a filmmaker and a stage 4 metastatic breast cancer thriver, and the star and creator of the film Love Always Mom, which is streaming now on Amazon Prime. It follows her journey to have a child while living with an incurable cancer diagnosis and her navigation through the uncertainty of infertility, egg donation, and surrogacy. She is also the founder of the Scion Gray Hope Foundation, which funds metastatic breast cancer research, provides family-building grants, and inspires hope through quality content that will help more cancer thrivers and their loved ones build families. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Trish and that you find some sort of inspiration within it.
And I love it.
Perfect. And so I saw your documentary, Love Always Mom. Didn't know what I was getting myself into. I just love documentaries. And so I was just like, oh, this one looks good. I haven't seen this one before. And I think I could have been watching maybe some birth documentaries or something, and that's why it popped up. But I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And it was, I mean, I'm sure people have told you this over and over again, but it was so powerful, so impactful, so thought-provoking, obviously in ways that I don't think a lot of us are forced to think about, you know. I was talking about it for days after. You did not leave my mind. And I was like, I need to find Trish and I need to talk to her because, I mean, your story is just so, it's beyond words.
Thank you so much. That means so much to me. It means so much. And that you did not know what journey you were about to go on when you clicked on it, and that you approached the story with openness and went along on the ride. And I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate you reaching out. This is awesome to chat with you.
It's honestly, it's my pleasure. So obviously I know your story because, I watched the documentary. But for those who don't know, tell us a little bit about yourself and your story.
Absolutely. I mean, it's, of course, there's a Before Love Always Mom, which is the documentary that's streaming on Amazon Prime. And there's obviously an After Love Always Mom. The story continues, thankfully. But basically the story is I'm a stage 4 metastatic breast cancer survivor. And I was not able to carry a child myself. Wanted to be a mom more than anything, and my husband wanted to be a dad more than anything. So we ended up having to use an egg donor and a gestational carrier, aka surrogate, in order to have our family. And it was quite a journey with lots of ups and downs that you would see in the film. Our egg donor and our surrogate basically, and their families basically became like family to us during the process. My son, spoiler alert, is now 4 years old, just turned 4 years old last weekend.
Oh, wow.
And you basically see him born in the movie. But basically we picked up a camera. This was in 2014 at this point. We picked up a camera in 2014 because I had an aha moment when I was sitting with a social worker, a nurse practitioner actually, who was trying to tell me all the different options that I could potentially utilize to build a family, or not utilize because of my diagnosis. So, we talked about IVF for myself. We talked about adoption, foster to adopt, and then egg donation and surrogacy, all as potential routes and the pros and cons, and how easy or difficult it could be for somebody with a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. So when I had that meeting with her, I had this aha moment of, oh my God, why is there not a camera in the corner of this room filming this session? Or if it was doing a Zoom recording of it, because it was such an eye-opening, light in the tunnel, like light in a very dark tunnel moment for me. that I knew other people were sitting in my seat feeling the same way, but hadn't met this other person yet who could lead them there or lead them to a direction. And so immediately I picked up a camera and started filming, and we built a lean and mean crew to film the story, and went on our journey. And we did not know when we picked up the camera whether or not we were going to be telling the story about me dying of metastatic breast cancer, or whether or not we were actually going to have our child, meet our child, and whether or not I was going to be able to raise my son. So we went with it, and thankfully I'm still here 4 years after filming ended, let alone since 2014. So
yeah. And I mean, your journey was, not as cookie cutter as just, okay, we're gonna get an egg donor, we're gonna get a surrogate, one shot, boom, kid. So tell me a little bit about that, because obviously there was one point where you were hoping to harvest your eggs, but couldn't because of, they found something, I guess, a reoccurrence in your brain.
Yes, it's kind of a crazy story, because when we kind of went through what the journey could look like, so this was an interesting part, like as a filmmaker who was also filming my own story,
Yeah.
It's like I had to visualize it for myself as a person, and then I had to step outside of it and visualize it also as a filmmaker of what does it look like. And I mean, if it all went smoothly, which we actually thought that it would or could, because we had an egg donor, a young woman who, didn't have any fertility challenges. We had a surrogate who had carried two children before in the past, her own biological children, which is supposed to make you feel more confident or give you a better chance of having a live birth, with said person. So we really felt like it, in all odds, it would go very smoothly. But alas, it's life, and it did not even that part of the process. But what you're referring to is in 2014, I was 1 year out from discovering that the cancer had metastasized to my brain, and I became stage 4. So after a year of that, of treatment, I decided in 2014 that I wanted to take the chance of harvesting my eggs, because I was not able to when I was initially diagnosed. So I'd have to get off of my medication, which keeps my estrogen low, because my tumors are fed by estrogen. So I'd have to get off my medication, do the IVF round. And the idea was I would harvest my eggs, we'd create embryos, we'd store them in a bank, and I could get back on my medication indefinitely, forever, I'd stay on it. And we could choose to have a baby in the future. So the idea being that I didn't know how long I was going to live at that point. So, hey, would we feel better going down that road if I was 5 years out, 6 years out? Like, when would I feel better? And in that 2014, I decided to have a brain scan. I was getting them every 3 months. And I was supposed to get IVF in April of 2014, and I had the brain scan would have lined up, and I was like, you know what, I'll just do the brain scan on a Tuesday, and if it's clear, when it's clear, I'll start the IVF meds on a Friday. It was like all planned out. And then of course I go in, and my world is shaken entirely again. They saw another little something, right where the original tumor was. Now, the crazy part of this story that is actually after Love Always Mom is because of that little thing that they saw, they thought was a tumor, I had to get gamma knife surgery, which you see the crazy mask that they had to screw onto my head. And they put you in a machine, and they're basically watching your brain as they target it, the lasers. to knock out the tumor. So did that process in 2014. And actually in 2016, when my son was 9 months old, what you see towards the end of the movie when I have another scare, they told me at that point, we're not really sure whether or not, we don't know what it is right now. It could be a tumor. It could be scar tissue from everything that your brain has been through. Let's just wait and see. When he was 9 months old, they thought it was growing again. So they were like, okay, we really think you need to treat this. But there was a new technology at that point, then Gamma Knife with the drilly thing. And it was a laser ablation, which they typically do for heart procedures and such at this point, but they had been doing it they had started doing it in the brain. So you would basically burn out the tumor. So when he was 9 months old, I went in and I had a laser ablation to my brain, but I could choose whether or not they biopsied it before they burned it out. And the doctor was like, I don't think you need to biopsy it. I mean, there's also a 1% chance that you could have a brain bleed. Like, do you really want to take that risk? All that stuff. And I'm like, I don't know, 1% chance versus like actually knowing something, because we live in so much uncertainty. It's like, I want to do it. So I did the biopsy, and that turned out to be scar tissue. And they ablated the scar tissue. It wasn't like they wait and see and then they decide whether or not they're doing it. They ablated the scar tissue because you want that out of your brain anyway. But it led us to think that in 2014, when I had the Gamma Knife, they could have just Gamma Knifed scar tissue. Like, the only thing we know for sure is in 2013, they removed a big ass tumor from my brain. But who knows in 2014 if, what it was, because that's the crazy part about the brain is in scans and all, like, they don't know for sure. There are moments they do know for sure. And then there's a lot of gray area.
Right.
So, I thinking of that, like, everyone was like, oh, are you upset that like you could have then done your IVF in 2014. This wouldn't have stopped you. I'm like, you know what? At this point, I'm looking at my son. He's 9 months old. Where we're doing, like, is it scary that we had to have this scare and we've had to have the treatment and then my brain went through something else? Like, not great, obviously. But at the same time, it wouldn't be him. Like, it wouldn't be him. I just feel like he was the one that was meant to be. This journey was the one that was meant to happen. And so, come what may.
Yeah, right. You just rolled. So, when you initially got diagnosed with your breast cancer, you were in your 20s, right?
I was actually 30 when I was first diagnosed. So I was 6 months into my 30th year, because we had we live in Los Angeles, but we went to Chicago, and my East Coast family flew to Chicago. And so we had this big 30th birthday weekend. And then 6 months after that was my diagnosis. And it was right before, it was December 19th. I'll never forget it. 2011, and it was 9 days before Christmas. I was working at Walt Disney Motion Pictures at the time, and like really hustling on the up and up in my career, and nothing's gonna stop me, I'm gonna get promoted, like all that whole track of thinking. We knew that we wanted to have children at some point in our 30s, but my husband and I were both kind of just trying to establish our careers. So we were still not there yet, but soon I felt like, turned 30. It was kind of getting there. The conversation was going to come up very soon. Yeah. And we were supposed to travel home to New Jersey for the holidays. Obviously already had our tickets from LA back to, so when I got diagnosed on the 19th, we were supposed to actually fly that night back to the East Coast. My doctor, since I was busy like packing and getting ready to leave town, I didn't go in to see my doctor. He called me with the diagnosis. So on the phone, are you sitting down? You have breast cancer, complete blank, like did not expect it at all. I have no family history of breast cancer. I'd been very healthy. I thought I had been treating my body really well.
Yeah.
I was always taught that people who get sick had to have done something to mistreat themselves in some way.
Yeah.
Not true. So it's my husband was there in the room with me actually when because he's a screenwriter, so he works from home. So thankfully he was there. But I just looked up at him. He knew I got devastating news, and I just remember my look. Like to him, he looked like I had just punched. I punched him with my eyes in the gut, and he just turned like white as a ghost. I call my mom, and I tell her. And my mother is very much a doer and very much, and I am too, but I still, I could not absorb the diagnosis. But I called her, told her, and she started asking me all these questions. And I knew none of the answers.
Yeah, yeah.
And she's like, why didn't you ask the doctor these questions? I'm like, I don't know what's going on right now. She's like, call him back right away and ask all these questions. And I was like, okay. And so when I called him back, he's like, yeah, I thought that you might have some questions. Why don't you come into my office? So I did. I was in it's just crazy to think about. Also just to think about the journey of learning how to advocate for yourself in all ways. But in this way, obviously, medically, that I didn't know before how to talk to doctors. I didn't know before how to get them to focus on my priorities when I walked into that. And this is pre getting sick, I didn't know how to have those conversations. They always seemed so busy and always seemed like they had to move on to the next patient. And it's like, no, you're paying them, write down your questions before you go into the room. Make sure they all get answered by the time you leave.
Right.
And, also if they don't answer them right away or there's something to follow up on, know how you're going to follow up with them. And so you're not waiting a whole other year to get those answers, they're definitely learned how to advocate for myself. But by the time we did fly back east, by the time I got off the plane, my mother had set up appointments for second and third and fourth and fifth. And it was a ridiculous amount of appointments where I was still in a total fog. Yeah. I'm one of 5 and almost 3 of my siblings would come to every single appointment and just sit and take notes while during the appointment. I think we were all just trying to figure out how we could process it and how we were going to tackle it.
Yeah. And it's so funny that you talk about how your mom was, because one of my favorite parts, if you can have a favorite part in a documentary that is just so, oh my gosh, emotional, is when she was adamant that she could be your surrogate.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's so my mom. It's just so, she's so, I love her. And I think because of her, that's why I wanted to be a mom so badly. She's so giving of herself, the idea that she would even volunteer that. And for people, that could be their only option, and if that was our only option, then I would have had to think really long and hard about that offer. Mm-hmm. I think for us, she offered it, and also in the movie, the great part about that moment is that's the first laugh in the film. It's really funny to watch the film with an audience. It's weird to watch your life again.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I love that scene because I'm just kind of waiting for because people sit there and hold on, wait, what is she saying?
Right.
What's going on? And then when they realize it, it's oh my God.
Yeah. It's a nice levity type of moment.
Yeah. She and my husband, that's why I'm married to my husband. He's definitely the more comical of us two. I'm more serious. He's definitely more jokey. And he's certainly looking at the film like, oh, like that's why we fit so well together. Like he made me laugh through all this craziness.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about the process of specifically finding the egg donor, because I remember in the film when you were basically on what was like a dating site for egg donors with them just saying like their educational levels and what they like to do for fun, and you see all these pictures. And I remember your husband being like, it's weird because it's like shopping for who I'm going to like have this baby with, and I've never met them. So tell me a little bit about how that was for both of you.
I mean, it's funny that he says that, because whenever he said that, I was like, honey, it's not like you're dating them, you know? Right. It's just funny that that's how he would think of it. Like, right. He's thinking of it as like, would I want to go? But I understand the thinking in that for him, it was, would I want to go on a date with this person? And then if I went on a date with this person and I got to know them, and do I like their personality enough that I would want to continue having a relationship with them, / I guess in his head, potentially have a baby with them. Like, those were like the things he had to think about.
Yeah.
For me, looking at the site, so first of all, I had no idea like how to find an egg donor. Like, I knew that egg donors existed. I just didn't even know how it worked. And so you can, apparently there's lots of different sites. And so you do kind of like shop around more for an egg donor than you do for a surrogate.
Right. Yeah.
So, you know, while you're potentially going down the road and locating a surrogate that you're a good match with, you could kind of be looking at all these different sites to try to find the right egg donor match for you. And it's a different decision because you don't have to worry about, okay, are they going to be a good first home for my child for 9 months, which
right.
is the thinking I had with our surrogate.
Mm-hmm.
With the egg donor, it's more of a long-term, we don't know like what characteristics from this egg donor are going to be part of our child.
Right.
So I think it is, I mean, and we don't know, like you still don't know. So it's a little bit of this, okay, I approach it as, do I like this person that I would want to be their friend?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, do we have chemistry as friends? Because I mean, also that's like what I hope for my child one day. Like, I hope eventually that I'm a parent, but I also hope that we have a friendship when he or she at that point, you know, because I didn't know what gender it would be, was an adult. So, you know, it was really hard for me to look. I was looking for a little bit of myself in the egg donor, maybe a better version of myself, because I was like, why not? If you can improve yourself, why not? But I was really looking for myself, and I was also looking for somebody that just had the same kind of personality ideals, that they were in it for the right reasons. Not that there's any right reason, you know, if you're doing it, you're being very, but there was something. When we found our egg donor, Callie, who of course is open, so I can share her name, it just clicked. Like, I mean, we got very lucky that with both our egg donor and our surrogate, you know, when you talk about the process being smooth, you know, we had love at first sight in a sense with both of them. Like, we didn't meet any other egg donors. Like, I looked at other pictures, and I had interest in other people that either weren't willing to be open, and it was important for me to find somebody who was okay not being anonymous, and not just because of the movie, you know, because of, and I approached it with the movie that the most important thing for me was my process first. Like, the movie came second. If the person did not want to participate in the filming, that's okay. If they were my first choice, I was still going to choose them.
Yeah.
The filming was just if they wanted to participate, and we would find a way to work around it if they weren't willing to be on camera or didn't want to be known or any of that.
Right.
And thankfully, you know, they were not only interested in being open and having a relationship, an ongoing one at that, but that they were open to filming and really, I think, were invested and felt a sense of purpose in making the movie as well. And then, we went to a few film festivals together afterwards, which was really fun to meet up and do those. And then they really got to see the people whose lives they were touching.
Yeah.
So that was, the egg donor thing was, and not what I expected at all, but I didn't know what to expect.
To compare to, right.
Yeah.
And I think that was, when I talk about your actual journey not being smooth, the one thing that was so miraculous in a way, I don't know how else to describe it, was your connection with Callie, your egg donor, and Megan, your surrogate. It really just seemed like you were, I don't know, it was just like this powerful tribe of women who were just understanding what they were doing, and they were all game with the process. And I really liked when the opening credits, of course we're getting like your pictures and things like that, but then you have this line about legacy, like leaving your legacy. And not only did I love that, but I love how open you actually were with the process. And I wonder if that's because of everything that you had gone through, made you just more open to the possibility of having these relationships with these women who were, so instrumental in you, getting the family that you wanted.
I will echo that those are very unique relationships that we forged, that we do try to, anyone who's has to go down this path of having an egg donor and or a surrogate, to know that ours is a unique, like, we hope that you have as great of a journey, and we hope that you have a connection like we did, but to know that that's it, not to model it necessarily, I'm like the right words, but that not to have those high expectations necessarily, like it's going to be your own journey and you're going to forge your own relationship. But if I were to advise them of like how to potentially have our relationship, the openness part of, you have to be open in order for them to then be open in return. And I think that's all relationships,
right?
Really. And whether or not, I was open because it's in my nature at all, or if I was open because of my experience, it's the whole thing with person, like, what's our son going to be like, the nature versus nurture and all that. Yeah. I don't know. I'd always been a very, like, all-inclusive, like, person. Like, I hate exclusivity in a sense. Like, I, even growing up, like, my family, our house was very much like open house. Like, all the kids would go after school to play, and we never locked the doors, like, no. And it was like this crazy, just very open household. My parents were always like, who's going to be eating dinner over here tonight? Like, sort of situation. And I think that, and I hope to do that for we'll lock the doors because we live in a city, but, I hope to give that to my son and my family as well. I do think approaching life in that way and seeing everyone as a potential friend or more is a great way to kind of go through life. So it definitely served us well in this process. I think the important thing too was really thinking and visualizing, like, what we wanted out of these relationships. So we didn't just go into a relationship assuming they would want the same thing. We had to articulate what we wanted and what we were hoping for, both verbally when we met them and also on paper when we filled out our own questionnaires. So somebody else could have read our questionnaire and said, I do not want to, this is too much for me. Mm-hmm. Not interested. But, we were clear. So then, because we were clear, it gave us the opportunity to match with somebody who also wanted that.
Mhm. Which is
So
so specific too, I think, with your journey, because, you know, obviously when you watch the film at each, you know, stage, you don't know how this story is going to play out. And so, you know, I saw from you, you know, obviously you were very open and willing to take this journey, but you also knew that there could be a chance that you may not live that long to see a lot of it through. Um, Maybe not the actual, you know, 9 months of pregnancy itself, but worrying about when your child is actually here, you know, how long you're going to be alive to raise them. And it was so powerful to see both Callie and Megan just being like, well, I mean, you never know what's going to happen in life. And I think it was Callie who was just like, yeah, I mean, at any point in time, anyone could get hit by a car and die, or you just don't know. And so it just speaks more and more to how God, universe, whatever sent your relationship was, because you were really all seemingly on the same page about what
oh yeah,
was happening.
seemingly we were that. None of that was like edited or modified for camera. Like they were those people. They said those things, and it was such a relief to me personally to hear those sentiments, not just when they said them in real time, but when I also watched it in playback and edit. I was like, oh my gosh, like that, it just took such a weight off my shoulders, because that scene, the therapist in the beginning, where I get very emotional about having to talk, like where she asked me all these questions that really drill down into my prognosis.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the reason I got so upset is I had to really own that prognosis,
Right.
say it out loud, which is hard in and of itself. But I was terrified that they were going to walk away when they knew the real potential of life versus death, etc., that they were going to change their mind. And that was the scariest thing to me, is that I was falling in love with them and they might say, but we can't do this.
Yeah. And so I wonder too, were there any talks between the three of you and also your husband in the event that you did pass away? Were Callie and Megan, were there talks of them being involved, you know, with the baby afterwards, or?
Yeah, more talks of so I mean, just to like go in order of like the first with my husband, when we were going to sign our surrogacy agreement. I mean, he already knew obviously the prognosis and had been, we'd been on this together. But when we were signing that agreement, I did have to kind of walk in. We had never very blatantly said it, so I just was like, knock, 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 we're signing this. Hey, I just want you to know, like, there's a chance that I could die, and I just want to make sure that you understand that you could become a single father, if that were to happen. Like, just want you to know. And like, before we sign this agreement, I need you to say, and he just looked at me like, but I did not know what he was going to say. And I did not put a camera up on this moment, even though I had already started filming. I just felt like it was too personal and for him, and he had already had a lot of issues with camera, as you could see in the movie.
Yeah.
But he just looked at me and was like, I think that you're still going to be here, but if you weren't, there's nothing that I'd rather do than raise our child in your honor. So, of course, cried. We both cried, hugged, and like all that stuff. And usually when I tell that story, I end up crying too. But then that was the first, I really needed him to be on board with that. Mm-hmm. And just to know that he's like, if something happens to you, I got this. So with that box checked, when we talked, I think with Megan, because she was carrying him for 9 months, we had to have in the contract, obviously, this would be there no matter what in the contract, but it just became a bigger deal because there was more likelihood for me passing. You do have to stipulate in the contract, if I were to die and my husband were to die, while she's pregnant, who is bringing that baby home from the hospital. So that's always in the contract. But I remember I had way too much wine one night and got chatting with my brother and had the whole, if something happens, will you take our child? And he just looked at me, he's like, Trish, no question, of course. And then my sister called me up and was like, I heard you asked him, I would take your child if, so I was like, I have the best situation in the world. I have family, literally, all of them want.
They're fighting. Yeah.
So, and that is something I think about even to this day of if something happened, would they, am I hurting anyone's feel? What would be the best house for him? But thankfully, I feel good in myself and where I am in my health. And I also feel obviously my husband's here and he's a great dad, and that will continue. And, Megan, we're having a Zoom double date with them on Saturday night. Oh. So we will see them on Saturday. And there's no quite, we're not putting, we would never put that burden onto them. It's not their place that they would take our child if something were to happen to us. They have their own children to raise, and that's a lot of work. And then Callie and Andrew, they live in Los Angeles. We're actually seeing them for a socially distant drink on Sunday night because they're local. So we're going to sit across from each other, and hopefully if there's no stay-at-home orders. But we're going to see them Sunday night. And, we've talked a lot about, one day when they have children, their children and our child will be half siblings and how cool that would be. And Callie and I are both really interested in nature versus nurture. So we find it really fun to text about some of the things that my son's doing that she remembers that she did, she did as a kid. And, so we have cool conversations about that instead of, and she has said it to me. She's like, I really appreciate that you're not threatened when he does something that's more like her than me. No, he does plenty of stuff that's like me too. He does stuff that's like Greg. He does stuff that's, and he's going to do stuff of all the people that he's going to meet in life that he's going to model. Yeah. So I think it's really cool and I also love her. So I love seeing parts of her in him. Yeah. That's actually making me really emotional to even think about that. About how you love your spouse or your partner that you choose to have a child with, and we very much chose these people to have a child with as well. Yeah. And so you do fall in love with them in a way, and then you end up seeing those things in your child, or you see the way he lights up when he sees Megan sometimes, or he'll, we talk about her and he'll ask that's stuff that's really rewarding to me. It's not a threat. He knows I'm mom. I'm maybe one day when he's a teenager, he'll say things that'll hurt me because that's what teenagers can do. Right, yeah. Who knows? We'll cross that bridge when we get there. Yeah. But we're open with him. We're open with them. And so hopefully that'll be a more fluid situation in the future, because it's not like he even would be learning anything new.
Right.
We'll have known his story all along.
Yes. Not only do we all have these, very traditional ways of how we think we're going to have a family, but also, in the film, I feel like there was a little bit of that with you. There was a moment where you were like, okay, I'm not going to have, a biological child. And of course that weighs so heavy on your heart, because most people, you don't think about the fact that you wouldn't have a biological child. And so you see your journey and being open to however you were meant to have a child and however your family is supposed to look, when that happens. And it was just so, it's not hyperbole for me to say life-changing. It really is, what they say, it takes a village to raise a child. And, in a lot of cases, it takes a village to create a child. And it's just so beautiful to have seen that, luckily, in the way that it happened for you all, because it doesn't happen that way for a lot of people, and that's okay. But seeing it happen in such a beautiful, organic way where everyone was on board was just so beautiful. So how do you think your, ideals of family have changed throughout your experience with all of this?
It's a really good question. I think I've always been very family focused. As I said, I'm the oldest of 5, and we were always taught that family is the most important thing.
Yeah.
But also I think we were really taught that like our family was the most important thing, if that makes any sense, right? Like we were just taught to protect each other and not necessarily worry about everyone else around us. Like we had friends, but that's their business. That's their stuff, And there's something beautiful about that, of course, of you have your pack and you feel very committed to that pack. But I think in 2007, when my husband, we weren't married at the time, but when we both moved out to Los Angeles together across the country from that pack that I had come from, we both really had to forge a different family even then. In our friends. I really, really missed my family moving all the way across the country. But at the same time, we did start to build a nice little community out here. And then when I was diagnosed in 2011, I think, my family definitely rose to the occasion, and they took turns flying across the country to sit through chemo with me and such. My dad actually lived out here for a month, renting an apartment down the street because he would go get me groceries and all that. So the family was definitely there. That pack was always still there, but it really tested the new community we had built as well, of what friends were going to kind of rise up and help us in that situation. And everyone was there. Everyone was there, and it made me that might have modified things for me in terms of family, because I was like, these people care for me just as much as my pack does. Mm-hmm. So now I can just make my pack bigger. I don't need to exclude them. I can lean on them and they can lean on me just in the same way. Why not? So that really tested that and forged that. And so I do think that maybe set the stage for rethinking the idea of traditional family when we went on this journey to have our child. And what you said resonated with me so much, of families are built in so many different ways. And, for somebody who can't have children, who their family does just become those friends, for life, that they might not ever have a child presence in their life, that's fine also. It's whatever you want. And when I worked at Disney, the people who I worked with, they really did help me so much during my diagnosis. I started calling, my coworkers, my Disney family, and so many of them I still do. And I think that idea of family is important in the traditional and non-traditional, in the personal sense and in a corporate environment, to feel those ties with the people that you see almost every day, and experience life with.
But obviously with the pandemic and everything going on, and, people having to modify, where they go and who they're around, is there anything from your journey of, having cancer, maybe some things with, the surrogacy and everything like that, but is there anything from that part of your life that you're able to put to what's happening now in the world that maybe helps you see it in a different way, with a different perspective that maybe most of us can see?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think so. That living with metastatic breast cancer, you're living with uncertainty. The average lifespan of somebody once they're diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer is 3 years. I have been here for 7. So I don't take that time for granted at all. And every few months I get scanned, and you get scan anxiety, and that uncertainty pops up again. You lose friends, that uncertainty pops up again, friends in the cancer community that have passed. So I think that, not to say I've become good at living a life of uncertainty, but I've become better at it. And I think with time, I will become easier and easier to embrace that uncertainty. And I think that this pandemic is that, and everyone's now experiencing that sense of uncertainty. And I think what's helped me in this is, like, I never want to think about anyone not doing well, but it puts it into perspective, and you're like, so many people, like, there's people who have died during this. There are people who are severely sick. There's people who are losing their jobs. There's people who can't put food on the table right now. Like, there's so many things that are really wrong with our world right now that are magnified because of this pandemic, caused by this pandemic and magnified by this pandemic.
Yeah.
So, I don't feel like I can give myself a chance to almost be sad in this. Like, I allow myself to feel what I feel and hold space for what I feel. But then I try to move on from that, because I just know that the only way things are going to get better is if I keep moving forward, and feel like I'm living a life of purpose. So even in this pandemic, okay, instead of worrying about, yes, mask, wear your mask, I'm immune compromised, you got to wear your mask, we have to it's a sign of respect, and we have to keep ourselves safe, but also keep each other safe. Like, we are in this world, we are all one giant family. Like, we are a human family. Like, let's all just come together and protect each other and love on each other. And if we just lead our lives with love, like, we kind of can't mess things up. Like, let's do that. But I think that framework has allowed us to kind of approach the pandemic in a better light. But it is tough, like, it's tough for anyone. It's tough even with this, being well versed with a life of uncertainty. But every day, I think, is a new day to try again.
Yeah.
So yesterday was a bad day. It's okay. You wake up the next day, you put 2 feet on the floor, and you say, it's good to be alive. I'm here. What can I do today?
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about just your health right now as it stands, because I follow you on Instagram. So I saw not too long ago you went for a scan and you were feeling a little, like you said, scan anxiety.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's like, as many times as you have the scans, it's always like, there could be something, like, it's happened before, it could happen again. And you get that anxiety. I get scanned for my brain every 6 months now. It used to be every 3 months. After a couple years of clear scans on the 3-month intervals, they upgraded me to every 6 months.
Okay.
So that's always a good. And now this time, also because of the pandemic, I see my oncologist every 3 months because I have to get a shot that also keeps my estrogen low. So I take a medication daily, and I get a shot every 3 months with the goal of, I've been in menopause for however many years,
Oh, wow.
which is another reason I could not carry my own child.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided, because of the pandemic, that it wasn't worth, we tabled scans because I had been no evidence of active disease for some time. That wasn't worth the risk at that point. And then I had a phone call, a FaceTime with my sister, and she's like, there's something weird going on, with your mouth, your face. I was like, what's wrong with my face? And she really freaked me out, though. And then my mom was with her, so she was taking a video of the video, and they sent it to me. And I was looking at it, I was like, yeah, there is something a little strange. she said, and I saw it in the video, like looked a little bit like Bell's palsy. Like a part of my face was almost like frozen.
Oh, wow.
And it freaked me out. And, I immediately scheduled, what we had decided was during the pandemic, we would table scan. So I hadn't been scanned for my brain in 10 months. And if any symptom, if I was having headaches, like I had when I was initially diagnosed, when they first discovered my brain mets, or any other symptoms, that I would immediately get scanned. So this was one that, okay, you had a moment where you looked like there was a Bell's palsy situation, triggered a scan. I went and got the brain scan. I was really nervous, mostly because I had seen what she had seen. And then I started to like psychosomatically feel all these, like, oh, there's like a numbness in my hand. Like I am spending a lot more time on my cell phone though. So maybe that's like, I could write everything off in my head. But then I was afraid that I was doing what I did before, which was not get seen because I could write it off as something.
Yeah.
So it's better to be safe than sorry. And I got the scan, and thankfully, not only was it clear, but they said that the scar tissue is starting to disappear, that it's starting to fade, which is amazing.
Yeah.
It's starting to heal. So I've now been no evidence of active disease because of the biopsy I talked about before, which now I'm counting that as scar tissue, that I've been no evidence of active disease since 2013. Even though I had to get a few treatments in there in between because we suspected stuff, but since 2013, and compared to the average 3 years, I mean, I just feel so lucky to still be here and to see my son's 4th birthday this past weekend.
Yeah. So how has that kind of shaped everything? Because, obviously in the film, again, like I've said, you just don't know what's going to happen. Luckily, you lived, and luckily you have a beautiful baby boy. It's Grayson.
Grayson,
right? Yes. And, so now that kind of being in the rear view a little bit, of course you still live with uncertainty. But how are you kind of, I don't know, just progressing now with, obviously, yes, you've been, cleared for 7 years. Your baby boy is here and you see him grow every day. Is there still that kind of little thing in your head of like, well, let me not get too comfortable or too happy or too, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, never, there's no trigger to not be happy. I think it's the reverse. I'm like, every day I need to be happy. I'm not going to let this kind of like dark shadow that might be hanging in the background.
Yeah.
My husband and I kind of made a pact, like an agreement with all this uncertainty, because as much as I experienced the scan anxiety, of course, he feels it as well.
Yeah.
And is nervous, and he's always very happy when I walk in and I say, it's all clear. But we made a pact basically that we were going to live our lives basically like normal, and deal with something if and when it ever comes up. All right, take that when out, if it ever comes up.
Yeah.
But I think the way that maybe it shaped more in the positive, though, instead of the negative, is like, as much as you have that little shadow that's lurking, that shadow or fear, it also motivates me to really consciously create my life and to use my energy and my resources wisely. That I don't know how long I'm going to have. So I want to do the things that I want to do now.
Yeah.
I was even texting before this Zoom with a friend of mine, and we're talking about, my son's out of preschool because of the pandemic, and we're talking about preschool and private school versus public school, and what I'm like, part of me is like, part of me just wants to homeschool him and travel around the world, like once we can travel again. And somebody, like, she's like, well, it'll get easier to travel with them though when they're older. And, like, my son's a really good traveler because of all the film festivals we went.
Oh, right.
And honestly, we went on a road trip to Palm Springs the other week, and I woke him up to go in the car for the trip, and he said, "Are we going to the airport?"
Not yet, buddy.
Yeah, he likes to travel. So, obviously that's like a pipe dream in a sense of homeschooling and traveling around the world. You know, kind of sounds amazing on paper, but it would be very challenging.
Yeah.
And also, am I giving him the best? Like, I don't know. So, but her perspective of, oh, well, wait till they're older. I'm like, I don't have that liberty necessarily.
Yeah.
And like, will I have any regrets if, you know, we don't get to travel and something happens? So, you know, live your life now. It kind of becomes like the mantra in a sense because of that fear that can lurk.
Yeah. So tell me about the foundation.
Yeah. We created the Cyan Gray Hope Foundation back in 2015 in order to fund the film and to bring it as awareness, you know, for metastatic breast cancer, and then also the distribution of the film on Prime streaming. We split every minute watched on streaming is like a drop in the bucket for our foundation. And we split that money between metastatic breast cancer research and a family building grant for a cancer survivor. And this year, in 2020, we have our first allocation towards our first ever family building grant. Oh, wow. We just chose intended parents, our recipients, and they literally just had their match meeting with a surrogate that I have to say, I know I said earlier that things may not go as well for other people as they went for us, but their match is so perfect. Like, I watched their Zoom match because I was like, I want them to have as much of an organic experience as possible. I should not be in their Zoom match meeting. Yeah. Let me step outside of this, let them have their thing. So I'm like watching it very voyeuristic, like watching it in retrospect. And I'm like, oh my God, like they're so perfect together. Oh, wow. I think that they're going to have their first transfer in January, and maybe hopefully their only transfer in January if all takes on the first try. Mm-hmm. But we set aside, because of the film, we were able to, San Diego Fertility Clinic is like waiving their fees as a fertility clinic. Oh, wow. The agency that matched them with their surrogate has given huge discounts. The lawyers who are part of the process, they've waived their fee. Like, this whole dream team has come together around them to waive their fees, to make it more affordable. I mean, it's still expensive. Mm-hmm. It's still an expensive process, but right now, because of all the people who've donated their services, it's about half of what it would have been. And then we are going to start a push probably right before Thanksgiving that'll take us through the new year to raise additional funds for them to offset some of the out-of-pocket costs, because it's still going to be a chunk of change. Yeah. And they've already been through so much: a breast cancer diagnosis, 5 miscarriages. They have quite a story. And
would this be their first?
This would be their first child and probably their only child. But you know, to be able to help somebody along their journey, to give them the love, the support, and the joy that we, you know, experience every day having our child. I know that it may not be a smooth journey. I know that they may not get to be a family. Like, I really hope they will, and we're giving them a shot, or a few shots at that, because they actually have a few embryos in the bank. So it's not just a one-shot deal. We can try a few times if it doesn't work on the first try. But this would be the Cyan Gray Hope Foundation's first grant and first family started after us. So we're just trying to pay it forward at this point.
That's amazing. And I mean, that's a lot in part due to the reception of your film. I mean, I think not only does it resonate with people who have similar stories and are going through that, but also someone who, you know, has no idea really what that world entails. Because obviously I'm kind of familiar with, you know, fertility and infertility and the things that you kind of have to do. But I did not know, you know, how that affects someone who has
cancer and especially if it's estrogen driven, you know, how that plays such a big part in you know, being able to have a child. So I just
Absolutely.
think it's amazing, you know, the reception that you guys have been able to create.
Thank you. And I mean, I hope the other thing, you know, that people get from, I mean, a few things that I feel like people can take away from the film. And one of them is a bit what you're saying of, I hope that people can watch the film and they can become more sympathetic to other people's stories and other people's experiences. You know, I feel like because we've become so aware of infertility and that there's IVF and all of this stuff, I feel like you can kind of hear people flippantly saying like, "Oh, we'll just do IVF." You know, like, "Oh, like all my friends did IVF." You know, they make it seem like it's no big deal anymore, and
just accessible to everybody. Yeah,
like one, it's expensive. Like it depends on if you're insured, what your insurance covers, all of that, and also like there's so many emotions that go that are stirred up by this. Like it's not an easy process to say the least. So I just hope that people become more sensitive to like, oh, my friends could be going through hardships while they experience infertility and are going through, you know, these fertility treatments. And just also understand like with a cancer diagnosis, you know, the hardships that to experience to know the anxiety and the fear, you know, that your friend may be dealing with on a regular basis because of what they're going through. So, I mean, I always think it helps to learn other people's stories and become more empathetic because we never know. Like people look at you or look at me and they don't know they don't know that I live with stage 4 cancer. I mean, I look healthy, like thank goodness. And so they kind of like write it off of she's fine, all good. And I am, but at the same time, you know, you don't know anybody, like what anybody's experience of anything is really. So to kind of forego judgment and just to approach everybody that we meet in life with this openness of accepting their story and their journey and learning from it.
Yeah. And I think my last question I would be, you know, remiss if I didn't ask is we kind of ended the documentary kind of what I think is a little bit of a cliffhanger with Megan saying that she was open to carrying another child if you wanted to go down that path. So is there any talks of maybe giving it another go?
There is not. Well, somebody had approached her asking her if she'd be their surrogate.
Oh, wow.
This was a while ago. This was like right after Grayson was born.
Okay.
And she said to them, because I don't think she had really thought about it either. Mm-hmm. She said to them, look, like, if I was ever going to do this again, which I'm probably not going to, but if I ever did, it would only be for Trish and Greg if they wanted a second child. Yeah. Which of course, you know, meant the world to us. And because she made that offer basically because we didn't approach her saying, hey, we're thinking about having a second child. Would you be willing? Yeah. She relayed that conversation to us. And we were like, oh, like, I mean, we did always want more than one child. We have no embryos in the bank. Grayson was our last and final embryo. Right. We would have to do the egg donation process again. And because we love Callie so much, I don't think we'd want to have anyone but Callie. Yeah. And so we didn't even have that conversation with her because we don't want to stir that pot. It is just such an expensive process. And I just think we feel really happy with where we are right now. Mm-hmm. And there are times, like being the oldest of 5, that I'm like, I really want Grayson to have a sibling. Yeah. But I think that's also made us rethink the traditional family as well, of we are trying to raise him that his cousins and his friends and all of that, like they can be like siblings too. Like there's no loss to us if we are not able to have a second child. And now we're able to also focus on helping other people build their families. And then they're going to become a part of, potentially, if they're again open to it, like then they become a part of our family, and their child will have a relationship potentially with our son, and it goes on and on and on. So trying to think outside the box in that sense. But that was definitely a very popular question at the end of every film festival. And like Megan was there, they were like, so are you going to help Trish have a second kid? I was like, we are happy. It's expensive.
Yeah.
We are going to pay it forward to other people now.
Yeah. Well, I think that's still a beautiful ending in and of itself.
Yes.
And I'm an only child, so I will say we are not as bad as people try to make us seem. We are great. We are very imaginative. Can do a lot by ourselves, very independent. So I'm good with the fact that you might just have Grayson. Like,
I am so good with it at this point. I am. There are moments, but it's a beautiful thing to watch him connect with his cousins and other kiddos and have that experience.
And that's what it is. Your friends become your close friends.
You might not have as much if you do have a sibling. Like, you're not as open because you have this. Like, I was like that because I had 4 siblings.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's like he might be more open to those relationships because he wants the buddy.
Yeah.
We'll see. Only time will tell.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for speaking with me. I just, like I said, I was obsessed with your story and your journey, and I still am. I follow you on Instagram, so.
Likewise. Now we're following each other. I am enamored with what you do as well, and thank you for creating this community. And I look forward to kind of going down this road together in life and knowing you. So thank you for reaching out.